Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Field of Dreams on ACTN. My name is Steve David, and I'm your host. Today I want to talk about our selection of coaches in the Trinidad and Tobago Football Association. I've got a all-star panel here who's going to assist me in doing that, and I would take time now to introduce them. I have the 1968 MVP of the St. Mary's football team, Alvin Henson. I call him Lucky. Gary calls him Duck. So Lucky Duck. Welcome to the set, Alvin.
You know, and people tell me, Alvin, you're still looking young, and you come and age me now.
Okay, we're glad to have you, buddy. And then I've got the engine room of the Trintalk and Presentation College teams. I wouldn't call the years. Larry Joseph. Welcome to set, Larry.
Thank you, Steve. Always a pleasure to be here.
And agents of all agents, all the way from Brazil to Trinidad and back, and all over the world. Narada Wilson. Welcome to the set, Narada.
Always a pleasure to be here, Steve.
Okay, guys. I have a serious problem in how we select our coaches for the national team. And first, Alvin, I know you know the process that they use to select the coaches. Can you help me and my viewers understand that process?
Well, I'm glad you initially now took me back in a little bit of history, because we have to go back to how it was prior, historically, to see how it is now and how it's supposed to be. One of the ways that it was done in the past, I'm talking about in the 60s, it generally was a recommendation from somebody who was a coach, a senior coach in the community from Trinidad and Tobago, and he would make a recommendation to the executive, and the executive would carry that to the general council, and that would be approved. For instance, Alvin Cornell's recommendation of Kevin Verity in those years was an example of that. Over the years, a number of the coaches, especially in the time that Jack Warner was the head coach, the secretary and head honcho, the head coach of the Trinidad national football team, because of his contacts with FIFA,
Correct.
he would often get recommendations of coaches who were available to be hired and would be good for Trinidad and Tobago. And oftentimes, with consultation with some senior people in Trinidad and Tobago, again, Alvin Cornell being one, and other coaches as well, a recommendation would be made to the General Council, and generally that was accepted. Over the years, FIFA started having technical committees attached to their own process, and technical committees were a part of each major football team. And we adopted that stance here in Trinidad and Tobago. So approximately 30 years ago, we started having technical committees in Trinidad and Tobago. And I, luckily enough, was happy to be a member of those technical committees, some of them in the past. The problem with us with technical committees in Trinidad and Tobago is that, one, it wasn't always an incarnation of every executive that came in, and sometimes it was sporadic. And the technical committee, and I remember Mr. Warner saying this on many occasions, gentlemen, remember, you are an advisory committee. You are an advisory committee with technical people advising the executive and advising the general council. Your advice doesn't always have to be taken.
Correct.
So in the large part, with people like Sedley Joseph and the senior coach Edgar Vidal being on the committee, etc., the advice was generally taken. As time went on, the committee sometimes would function and sometimes would not function. And as a result, usually it was a recommendation that came from Mr. Warner, so somebody who became the head coach. And similarly, some of the coaches of the other teams, the under 18 team, the under 16 team, etc. And that has been how it has been for quite a while with intermittent technical committees over time. Now let's come down to the recent executive. John Williams, and I must say he started off very well. When John Williams was appointed, he started off with a technical committee, which Dexter Skeen was the chairman of. And initially, we had to eliminate Stuart Charles was one of the persons who eliminated himself because he wanted to continue coaching. And
right.
One of the criteria that we outlined for somebody to be on the technical committee, it was not to be somebody who wanted to continue to be an active coach. Right. So we had a technical committee. That technical committee was earmarked, and we did interview everybody for every position, including the senior positions and junior positions. So over time, over a period of a year and a half, I remember interviewing at least 20 coaches, senior and junior, and seeing their CVs and whatnot. We would shortlist them and then have discussions as to who should be the coach of the various groups. And we had lots of discussion because people have various theories of who should coach junior teams. I like more senior coaches to coach junior teams for various reasons. Other people feel that, the junior coach should get the junior ranks, etc. I felt sometimes that the people on the assistant coaches on the senior team should be coaching down below at the same time to get a head coaching job. And we had discussions like that. The problem came about with the last technical committee that functioned like this, in that our recommendation, after doing a lot of due diligence work in selecting and trying to select a national coach, it was totally rejected by the board without even a happenstance of coming back to the technical committee to choose somebody else. So we all decided, if I'm going to do all this work, I am the technical person and various technical person, and you're going to make a decision on your own, then you really don't need me. So we decided to all resign. I think I was the first to resign. The chairman resigned afterwards. And since that time, there has not been a true technical committee in place. They're trying to get one. The technical committee now really functions with the technical director and the vice president of the association. One of the vice presidents, Richard Kwanchan at present, is usually on the technical committee always. And that's the general framework of how it's functions.
For you two guys over there, and you guys don't know where I'm going with this yet, but I just want to hear your views on what you think, what Alvin just said, plus do you think we have a good and fair system in selecting coaches?
Well, obviously, based on what Alvin's last statement was, where the technical people's recommendation was totally rejected, and there was a decision that was made without any feedback or discussion with the technical committee. If that still holds for now, then we have to say no, the system is broken.
Yeah, for me, I think, some of the criteria for the persons on the technical committee, as Mr. Henderson outlined, being persons that do have an active involvement in football, probably have been away from the game for a little time. In that capacity, I think all of that, it sits well. What is unfortunate, and you see, at least, it did not come across as though they advised that we should go this direction, and we chose not to, because I believe if they chose not to, then it should go back to the technical committee within the context of what they're looking for. Maybe it could be the finances were a bit out of reach, and they could then say, well, could we work with another name or two could you all just dangle with these names because of certain constraints? But it was unfortunate because it did come out as, or come across as, based on this was their recommendation. We may or may not have liked it, and we went with someone else. That is a bit unfortunate because it gives no power or no respect to the technical committee. And then, you know, if the board of directors doesn't have persons who are technically inclined, then we kind of leading in the wrong direction. We may be able to say on a good day, if we have 8 board members and 4 were involved, it may be a hit and miss. But what about if there comes a time where an era occurs where it's totally 8 persons who don't have any sort of, you know, experience in the technical side of the game? That could be something that is disastrous.
Okay,
let me just add now, I agree that the board has every right to reject.
Accept or reject, yes.
Accept or reject, because we are an advisory committee.
Of course.
The problem I saw in this situation was there was a lot of due diligence work done. People were interviewed for 45 minutes. The people who were in the room heard the interview. The people who were on the board didn't hear those interviews.
Correct.
We heard the interviews. We saw the CVs. We reviewed the CVs.
right.
We, because of our group, because of our technical history, we even recruited 2 senior coaches who weren't voting members to give us advice.
You wanted to cover
And all of that
the
advice
angles,
was rejected without even coming back to the committee.
So it's like, it's an oxymoron then. If you look at the CVs, you interview, and then the selection is made by people who doesn't follow what you said.
Well,
And then even...
Well, I mean,
as I
the
said,
selection is...
Mr. Warner, as I said, that's why I quoted the principle of Mr. Warner years ago.
Correct.
He said, you all are an advisory committee.
Don't
We
expect
don't
that
have
your
to take
recommendations
your
will be
advice.
accepted.
And I said on this occasion, because of the scenario that happened, I felt that on this occasion, it was no sense continuing in this vein.
Yeah,
and that's why I
because
decided.
obviously it makes you feel as if your contribution or even your presence of being part of that committee is useless.
Yeah.
If what you were asked to do, you do, and then it is totally rejected by the higher powers. So, and I mean, it's as Alvin was saying, it's not like if you expected that they would have accepted your recommendation, but the least they could have done is at least engage the technical committee with some sort of communication that says, okay, we have read it and we've looked at it, but X, Y, Z. But it seems as if they had all intentions of rejecting the recommendation from the technical committee if the recommendations were not what they were looking for. That is how it looks like. Because, I mean, I would have felt the same way like the doc after doing all that due diligence. The least you could have expected is at least they would have considered and gotten back to you. The least.
Okay, we need to take a break. Stay tuned, viewers. We'll be right back after the short break.
Every Sunday at 2 p.m. on ACTN The Voice, we'll be taking you on a journey down memory lane with our Sunday classics. Relive the moments. Bonanza at 2 p.m. Little House on the Prairie at 3 p.m. Gilligan's Island at 4 p.m. Family Matters at 4:30 p.m. Hogan's Heroes at 5 p.m. The Jeffersons at 5:30 p.m. This is Sunday Classics on ACTN The Voice.
You're now changing your question.
What I would say, Steve, is this.
My first question was, and roll back that tape.
I made my debut for Crystal Palace against Tottenham Hotspur.
My responsibility was to get the ball and make things happen offensively.
In all the time we've played together, I've always been the decoy.
Welcome to Field of Dreams on ACTN. My name is Steve David, and I'm your host. Okay, welcome back, viewers. Yes, guys, so I have a real issue with the selection of coaches, especially with the younger teams, that recently happened when Stern was appointed. And nothing against Stern, but I think he's still a young of a coach, and we have such good senior coaches that we can put. They have Brian Williams, they have even Fenwick. Yeah. Nobody gives him a chance at all. We have Jabaz, who's gone, Latby is gone. We have a lot of people.
They have a lot of names.
And then, so what's going on with our coaching and the selection of our coaches?
Well, I would say what is a coincidence, and then I guess we could stress on it, is that at the two lower levels, the under 15 and the under 17, we both seeing that the assistant coaches from the senior teams are the head coaches for those respective teams. So that right there could speak about something, because Stern and both Mr. Stuart Charles, they are assistant coaches at the senior level, and they have taken up the mantle as the junior coaches. So we could start with that. It proves that maybe, I don't think we'll be going on experience with somebody like Stuart Charles. With Stern, we could somewhat say experience, but they're already up there. So it has to mean that because they're already in the system, it's an easier way for us to keep them active when one of the contributing factors is a limitation on funding.
Already in the system means they're getting paid for assistant to the national team, so we put
because at the senior level, that is one of the categories where the football is, the money is always kind of circulated. If that is priority one, usually in the federations, that the senior team, the senior men's team, is usually financed more or less all the time. So at least the paycheck would be circulating at that level, and at the junior levels, there would be some constraints.
So if I am the assistant coach for the national team, the big team, and they put me to coach the under 15 team, I don't get paid for that?
Unless you have all coaches come with a contract.
Correct.
And there are specifics in the contract of what your duties are. If you got a national senior team contract, there are specific duties that you have. It may mean that in that contract, sometimes it could spell out the fact that in the downtime, you may have to coach at a junior level. And that has been the case in some people's contract. But in Stern's contract specifically, I don't think, at least I have not heard, that was his
contract.
He had to absolutely do that.
Yeah.
I think he wanted to do it.
Yeah.
He wanted to do it because, one, it's gaining him experience as a head coach, and it would be a feather in his cap, in his CV, etc. If he could coach a team. In addition, he's helping out a national situation. He's helping out a national situation that is limited because of the lack of funding.
Yeah.
There are many coaches who want junior coaching jobs in Trinidad and Tobago. They would love to coach junior national teams. The problem is not many of them, very few of them are willing, one, to work for no numeration or numeration that they were promised and never got. And there are a number of bills that have piled up over the years due to junior coaches that have not been paid. They have not been paid, so these coaches have done it once, they've done it twice, and the third time they said, I cannot continue to do this. Even our technical director had to hold off on his services because he wasn't being paid. So a number of people want the job. Now people are saying there are people in the country who are willing to do the job for free. And some of them are decent coaches. Somebody has to be able then to do the due diligence on that.
Yep.
If you're going to have a voluntary program for junior coach.
But how do they expect our program to improve, to compete with the Panama? Look at Panama Rise and so on and so on. Panama and the tie with Brazil recently and all of that. How they expect us to compete with that if we just like begging people to come on board and coach for no money?
I think it's almost along the lines of what Doc is saying. I think even with the opportunity, there are quite a bit of coaches that you said that probably very well established with whether it's their academy, something private or in some other institution, that may render their services on a voluntary basis. But I think this system isn't opened up and advertised for them to do that. Because I believe if it's competitive enough and you do say, listen, it's open to anyone who has, have your US visa in hand, because you're trying to say that the federation is limiting their resources. Have your visa in hand, willing to travel, put in the time. I think we could probably have about 10 coaches who would compete heavily for it. But when it's down to, it's kind of not really advertised that much, and we just put in someone that we know is willing, or we talk to 5 people that we know. I think that is the problem there, because for that under 17 and even 15, the names went up, but it was more or less we saw almost the same set of names. I don't know if every coach at every youth level across the country knew that there was this opening, and the limitation was, that you wouldn't be paid for it, and if you're still willing to apply. Because I could tell you there have been countries I've been to where that is the case. There are guys that they could put out voluntary, and you would get quite a bit of good coaches who may be in a university, at a good level, may have an academy that is flourishing, so they have the time and experience to go out and do it. But I don't know if that is happening here.
Larry, if you were a junior player now, or if I was a junior player now, would you, because a coach could make you or break you. So if they put an immature, or not immature, a rookie coach to coach at that level, when is the time that I need to get all the nurturing I can to improve my game and make it better? And that's a point that could be made or broken. And how do you take that? I wouldn't want to be a kid in this time, would you?
Well, I mean, if we were to put on the mind of a youth player, whether under 15 or under 17, whoever is placed in front of him at that age, and they say to me, this is your coach, I immediately make some assumptions. One is he's qualified and he knows what he's doing.
Correct.
All right? Because let's say I'm at under 17.
Right.
And they put somebody like Stern John to coach me. Stern is one of the present past players who probably an under 17 guy may still have heard something about. So obviously I have somebody like Stern John as my coach. I'm like, wow, he has played at a high level. He obviously knows what he's doing. So with that mindset, whatever Stern dishes out for me on a session, I would take it, and treat it as gold.
Yeah.
All right? For those who probably would be a little more experienced in the football field and understand the technical side of things in terms of both the development and competence, they now would be able to challenge and critique Stern's methodology. To say, yes, he may have been a good striker, he may be our top goal scorer, but when you take him out of the player status and put him under the coach's status, is he as competent as a coach as when he was a player?
Correct.
And that's where you have to look at it. And we all know the old adage, because you could have played good doesn't necessarily mean you could coach good. So that's why you need to have certain criterias that most associations have, where you would want your coaches, regardless of what level they want to coach at, must have a license, a FIFA license, whether it's a B license or A license, which guarantees that you have some level of competence. And of course, with the different age groups, like in Stern's case, as the doc was saying, it's a good experience for him to pad his CV and all that sort of stuff that goes with actually taking part in the activity, while the financial constraints are there. But for a youth player who sees a former national player as the head coach, I mean, he is blown out of the water by that. It is left for the more experienced people to now say whether that coach for that particular team is competent enough.
And Larry, that's where the technical committee came in. Part of the job of the technical committee was to be an oversight on all the junior national teams. In fact, all the teams. Although when some of the foreign coaches have come, they answer to only one man. They answer to only one man in the past, and in that case, it was generally Mr. Warner who paid the piper. Things execute. So, what happened to the coaches afterwards was that they answered to the technical committee. And they would often have to come and give a report and a review over a 3 or 4 month period of what is your program, what have you done, what are you aiming at. And oftentimes the technical committee, many times, I would go out and watch at all hours if I had a free hour to go and watch the national team train or any level. People will see me in the stand watching the national team. And trust me, when a coach sees a technical member watching you with your sessions, you know that every session that you produce out there has to be of some quality.
You know, and to pick up on what Larry was saying, if I was a 17-year-old and I see the top goal scorer, you know, I like that, but for respect, I wanted to see the older one. I wanted to see the Brittle Sinclair or Everett Cummins or somebody with more years behind them. That's how I would feel.
Well, I don't think you would have been saying that as a 17-year-old. That's what I'm saying. You, a 17-year-old, I doubt would be saying that. You know, it would take an older head
to say that.
To say that. But for the 17-year-old, he's not going to be thinking that.
Okay, but what about his development, though? I mean,
in his mind, he's being developed. I mean, I am being coached by the top goal scorer for Trinidad and Tobago. What does he have in his makeup that says he's not?
Okay, but it's in his mind. But I'm talking about seriously, not what he thinks. What is actually happening? Is he being developed?
But so he's not going to be the one, because what is he going to compare to or with? It will need somebody external to do that for him.
I think what was one of the factors also, I agree with more senior coaches working at the bottom, believe in that upside down pyramid sort of thing. But as the kid, the reality is with this generation in particular, is that they have so much access to information that they need to see things to actually believe things more than before. You know, the stories for me might have sufficed, but with them, they need access. I actually thought that was one of the reasons why Kenwyne Jones was even given an assistant position with the team, because I said, you know, his experience isn't that much in coaching. I think he's done a secondary school level. There were some reports that were saying, does he have his badges or not? But I think because Kenwyne is our more recent retired player, I think all the kids have seen him in the EPL or in any of the other leagues that he played in the States and stuff like that. So, and then he's financially probably in a good situation, so he could lend his time at this moment. So for the kids, I think that is a little morale booster. Does Stern have the experience, as you're asking for, you know, even in his short career, that could actually enhance a kid's development? I think what Doc was alluding to, I think, is more, it should have had a technical committee, which would have had maybe a senior coach that could be there to at least lend some help to Stern. Because I think if an older coach is there with all the experience, Mr. Cummings and quite a few other persons who've done it over the time, do these kids respect them enough to understand what they're getting? Because that is what happens in a country where the coaches are respected. So Brazil, any young kid sees a Zagalou or any of these older coaches step on the field to do a session with you. For them, that is mind-blowing, because they believe they could only get the best from him because he's been highlighted so much that in their psyche it's there. With us, I think some of the older coaches, the newer kids, they don't really have that direct connection and understanding of how good that person is. So they may actually see him on the same level as they may see a junior coach, because they're just getting the experience.
And that's what we're going to pick up when we come back, because that's my point. My point is you can always bring a Kenwyne Jones or a Stern John to talk to them, to relate with them, to do some stuff with them, but not to hold the mantle to to be their coach. That is my position, but we'll talk about it when we get back. Viewers, we'll be right back after the short break.
Looking for a safe place for the whole family? Well, now you found it. We are ACTN The Voice, your family-friendly station. Whether it's current affairs, kids and classic TV, sport and community features, Christian and music programming, plus so much more, ACTN is the station for you. Join us each day for programming that puts morals, values, and family first. We are ACTN The Voice, your family-friendly station.
You're now changing your question.
What I would say, Steve, is this.
But my first question was, and roll back that tape.
I made my debut for Crystal Palace against Tottenham Hotspur.
My responsibility was to get the ball and make things happen offensively.
In all the time we've played together, I've always been the decoy.
Welcome to Field of Dreams on ACTN. My name is Steve David, and I'm your host. Okay, welcome back, viewers. Yeah, like I said, guys, I have real problem in our coaches because I feel if we have the most senior coach picking up the more junior team, and we could bring the Stern John and the Kenwin Jones and whoever to demonstrate something for us, especially if they're attached with another team. Bring them to participate.
Let me ask something to throw at you three. In that same situation that you're asking, it would be necessary if we had a system of football that Trinidad plays, because then the senior guy would just be ensuring that we continue. But when we don't really have a style of play and all that has been legendary for years, anybody that comes is just going to introduce whatever style of play. So we're not necessarily going to see the benefits of an experienced coach coming, because his style may work, may not work, the young style may or may not work. But if we had a style of play, would you say it would be necessary or we'll be forced to have a senior guy, because then he would know exactly what we're working towards because he's done it before?
And that was one of the reasons that I was one of the advocates of, especially in the period that we are in now, where you are only as a senior national coach and a senior technical staff, you are only getting players five days before a game. The rest of the time, in my opinion, if I'm on the technical staff of the senior national team, there's absolutely no reason why I can't coach at a junior level. And maybe the contracts can be made out to be such, so that because you're coaching at the senior level, you get paid a certain amount. You're coaching at the junior level, you get an additional fee for coaching at that time. And at the same time, a proper functioning technical committee can evaluate you now as a head coach, because being a head coach and being an assistant coach are two totally different things. You can now see you as a head coach and to see if you are one of the people eventually who would be considered for the senior coach of Trinidad. But as one of the problems, and a huge problem, the lack of finances in our football is causing a situation where it's actually a snowball heading downhill, and the problems are accumulating with time.
But it's affecting our growth and our youth players. And,
well, it has to.
And then we're saying,
for
us it's not as good as we used to be, but because they're not getting what they should be getting. And I think it's a disadvantage to the younger players.
Yeah, unfortunately, it is a reality that is facing the local football now. The lack of finances has that ripple effect to the whole structure of football in Trinidad and Tobago. But when we get to the business side of things, in terms of the senior teams, when we have to enter competition and people are looking at results, and then we don't get the results, the normal fallout from poor results where people feel the coaches are not it all stems from the fact that there is a lack of finances. I mean, we could go into all the different beliefs as to why we don't have finance or whatever, but it wouldn't change the fact that the lack of finances is negatively impacting on the overall development of all the football in Trinidad, from the youngest to the senior team. So I suppose it would explain why you would have some coaches being appointed, because there isn't the finances, and I rather alluded to it earlier, to offer salaries to more coaches. And so you have to go with who would work within the constraints, the financial constraints that there is. So maybe the powers that be are left with very little options as to who they could put in these positions. But yes, the modern game today, unfortunately, must have finances in order for it to operate. Because you wouldn't always get people who would just volunteer their time and their services to get to do the thing. And then some of them, if they do want to, maybe the powers that be don't even entertain people like those, because they want to keep people close to them who they're comfortable with, and that whole human nature part, I think. So, you know, inside of that leaves us to where we are right now. I mean, it's unfair to the kids who are coming up, because the time is not going to wait on them, right? And remember, we always have to remember that we are training them and developing them to compete at the international level. The rest of the world is not waiting for Trinidad and Tobago to fix the business.
Right.
And that's something that we have to be aware of, right? It's just sad that where we sit here today, when we look at where we were a few years ago, if we had continued in an upward trend, by now, you know, we would have been, of course, much more advanced, both in terms of the performances from all the age group and the results that we would have gotten. Unfortunately, that's not where we are right now.
There's a solution to all of this in my mind. And the solution is, and in part it's coming a little bit with this new league coming, that the administrators of our football should be full-time professional people. Meaning that they should have competence in the area of administration, whatever that may be, and that they should be paid for their services. And that they should be asked to produce an output and have endpoint and have time constraints, so that we don't run into the problems that we are having now, where we, you know, sometimes we have a good committee, sometimes we don't. We're supposed to have this committee, we don't have it, because the key administrators
are all voluntary.
Are voluntary. The time for voluntary administrators in football in a national level are over. And I feel that we should have professional administrators. And that's why when we asked Jamal that question, will the commissioners in the new league be paid? That is the plan. Yes, that has to be so. There must be some kind of remuneration for people to put out their time and their energies, and to be forced to give us quality work. If people are not being pushed and have to put out quality, then you're not going to get.
And it's true that if the head ain't good, I mean, everything else is bad. But it also seems to me as this is so, there's a certain group you have to be in to break into this national team, which is totally unfair. And if they had worked with the advisory committee, it should be open to everybody, every coach. And then we select the right person for the job. I mean, if we don't do that, not only we hurting the whole country, we hurting all the young players. Our fight as a youth is against time, because you have this much time to make it happen, and then it's over for you. So we have to make sure that we give them as much as possible with their space or their time. Otherwise, they're over. In 10 years, they're done. And then what?
Are we playing games with them? On Field of Dreams.
Huh?
10 years' time, they will come on as a guest on Field of Dreams.
They'll come on as a guest on Field of Dreams. And see how bad this was. All right, there is lots of coaches out there. I want us to talk about that. I mean, that who we think. Let me throw some names out at you and tell me if thing. Let's start with Angus Eve. Why wasn't he considered?
I don't know, because I think Angus is, young coach, has the air of a lot of the kids on the west side and even in south, has produced results at couple teams, at the school division as well as, pro league. And I think has voiced that he's willing also over the years. I think Angus could have been maybe number 1 or 2 on any list, on any technical committee in Trinidad. I really don't know if the offer was even made to him or even entertained by them, but he would have been somebody that should have been in the framework, especially he's like he has records in terms of appearances for Trinidad, so it's even legendary for him to be involved in football at any stage.
I would go on record as saying that at this time I felt that Angus Eve would have been the best person after Latapi to take our under-17 team. In fact, I think perhaps he might have been even before Latapi on that occasion. The problem is you have to remember that Angus Eve is a professional
coach. Correct.
He is being compensated by the groups that he's coaches and teams that he's coaching at present.
Correct.
And if our situation financially is not right, how can you entertain to bring a professional coach on board? You're bringing another Anton Cornell, where Anton Cornell is a professional coach. He is the technical director. And for years now, he's been begging for his funds. He's working. He has been working for free for quite a while, and then finally threw his hands up in the air and said, sorry, I can't do it anymore.
Here's how we can do that. We can go to Angus Eve team and says, we don't have the funds, or we can add some of the funds, help you with some of the funds to pay him, but we want him to be coach, because back in the day, coaches didn't get paid. But now we understand they get paid. So go and talk to and see if you can work something out with this team.
Who should do that? The association?
Yeah.
Steve, you live in a different land to
I think
everybody else.
If the finances is a guarantee, because the teams that he works for, I'm sure they pay him on a timely basis, and they can. You're going to ask Angus to now either add to his time that he's already committed, or from his time that is already committed, he now gives to another entity. But I'm sure the teams or the clubs that he works with, they would say, we may not have a problem with him giving some time, but ensure that when I pay him at the end of the month, that your joint amount could go with mine. I don't think he would want to risk getting less and waiting on the finances that they committed come in. I think unless, it's really just him wanting to give his entire Sunday or days free, it would affect what he's already guaranteed on a daily basis.
But I mean, it comes to bring it to the same barrel, it's the same line. And the national team training is what, once or twice a week? It's very little.
But then it may have the times when they have to travel and all of that, and it increases.
Kind of thing.
Right now, the national team is training for a tournament in May.
Right.
In fact, they're behind time.
In Florida,
and they are actually training. I think the minimum training is 4 days a week. It's actually supposed to be 5 days a week. They're training 4 days a week. There was a recent camp abroad, etc.
Correct.
How is a coach who's coaching 2 other teams going to be able to find the time to coach a national team?
He's not doing nothing now.
Who's that?
The Pro League is not playing now, and the Colleges League is not playing now. So Angus is on hold.
He's not on hold. He is under contract.
I know. So ask the club to allow him the time to do this.
I think he probably maybe at this point in time it may have been okay, but there would reach a point a month or 2 from now where I think his commitments would be, when we have like the Gold Cup and all that, that is in time for, a lot of preseason and other things that he may have.
Let's pick that up when we get back. We need to take a break. Viewers, we'll be right back.
You're watching ACTN, The Voice. ACTN The Voice, your family-friendly station.
You're now changing your question.
What I would say, Steve, is this.
But my first question was, and roll back that tape.
I made my debut for Crystal Palace against Tottenham Hotspur.
My responsibility was to get the ball and make things happen offensively.
All the time we've played together, I've always been the decoy.
Welcome to Field of Dreams on ACTN. My name is Steve David, and I'm your host. So welcome back, viewers. All right, guys, let me throw some names out at you, and let me hear what you have to say. We're talking about senior, not senior, under 17 and under 15. Well, not under 15, under 17 coach, because there was the
most recent
group that coach. That was that where Stern and Kenwin Jones is got. So let's talk. I throw out at you Hudson Charles, Brian Williams, and Dale Saunders. I'll give you three names. Two of those are.
I would just say with Hudson Charles, he has the experience because with the senior team, when it was Stephen Hart, Hudson Charles, and Derek King, we're seeing Stephen Hart and Derek King in Canada for their Premier League. But Hudson has the experience just as much as Derek would have gained under Mr. Hart. So I think he may, in that list you called, I would actually put him almost first because he's had the most experience as a senior assistant coach, and it would have been ideal, especially that he's not linked with any of the teams right now, that he goes down because he has already known what we want the end product to look like. Yeah.
Well, I think Hudson would be a competent coach for the under 17. And we are assuming here that there's money to pay him. Right? So I'm not going to go there because no money, no love. What I'm speaking about with these people is assuming that there is finance. Brian, I know Brian had a lengthy stint with the under-20s in the times past, right? So he's presently coaching Rugby Connection. I can't remember which age group. I think
younger group.
One of the younger groups, and he's accustomed to coaching youth players, right? So he would be competent for the under-17s, right? Is he going to be better? My question with these guys, Dale Saunders, I know, has had a stint with one of the junior teams also at some point in time. Doc, you need or Narada will have to correct me on that.
He may have been an assistant coach with, I can't remember, probably
right, but I believe Dale is involved at the youth level with some group.
He's with Mukarapo,
right?
And he's a coach at senior level with Central, with Joe Public.
Right, so he has remained within the coaching field. He has always remained there. Right, so his hands would be on the pulse of youth football. I don't think he could go wrong. The question I would ask is if any one of those three would be an upgrade to Kenwin and Stern. And I mean, there's actually no record that we could show that would be able to say.
Well, we don't have no record for Stern.
I know, so that's for neither of the others for national, besides Brian, who did the under-20s.
And Hudson Charles coach.
Hudson was with the senior team as an assistant.
He had a short stint as the by himself as the senior coach.
Right.
Short stint.
So if you want to go with seniority, then obviously,
and I think
he would be senior to Stern and Kenwin for an under 17
I think
job.
even at the assistant level, his track record, if we go in with the statistics, him under Stephen Hart, I think would have been a better track record than Stern under Dennis Lawrence at the moment. Right. And then I think Stern at Central versus Dale Saunders at Central may have been almost the same, if I'm not mistaken. Dale might have won
a little more
because that time they were really financially secure. So,
but it's hard really to use these factors in terms of translating it or transferring it into the competency of a person onto a team. So for me, it's really, really difficult. Those are the names that we want to throw in the pool. We don't know whether these people were given a phone call and based on the condition they refuse. I mean, they're the only ones who could answer those questions, right? So in the absence of any information, concrete information, I am not going to make assumptions that I can't prove.
And that is why, again, a technical committee for the choosing of coaches for the association is needed, because everything about choosing coaches and who is appointed should come through the technical committee.
Because
they will do the due diligence on all of these coaches. They will compare records. They will go and see them coach, see who they're coaching, etc., and how they're carrying out their sessions. And then they can make recommendations, which can be rejected, but they have to be rejected with substance.
Which should not be able to be rejected. Either technical committee says this is what you should do. That's what should happen.
I think also because what it gives, it clarifies, because even a name that we didn't mention is there's also another assistant, Caleb D'Souza, who's involved with the team. And it's a name that I don't know if many people around the national level have heard before. I've been fortunate to meet the person years ago because I think they have an academy somewhere on the East-West corridor that does very well. And they've been involved in one or two things, I think, if I'm not mistaken, with some of the tertiary level institutions in their little league and stuff. So that name came up. And when I saw it, again, like Doc, I was, in my capacity, was wondering, how was the recommendation made? Yes, he has a decent track record, but who put the name forward? Especially that it wasn't a name that we've all heard of before. So again, a technical committee is really, important in that case, because it would have been able for us to clarify as to why his track record may speak at the youth level. But we know.
And we didn't even talk Clayton Morris as well. He's another one. I mean, he's another one that I think.
Well, I agree, and those are high-profile names that easily jumps out at us, as Narada was saying. But I'm sure there would be like some second-tier coaches who would love to have the name thrown into the pool if, as the doc is intimating here, there's a technical committee that would analyze all these people's work and come up with a technical suggestion. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. So some of these guys would love for somebody to come and have a look at the sessions, wherever they coach and the teams and whatever, and to be able to make an informed decision about the competence, because it has to come back to their competence. Their competence could only be judged with the performance of the teams that they are associated with, right? And even that still has to be taken with a certain other factors involving, as the doc says, going and looking at the session, because sometimes results alone does not speak to the competence of a coach, because you could have a coach who inherits some tremendous players and have 2 or 3 flyers of a season, right? And it would mask his incompetence because the players are so good. So you can't mask a session. If you go to look at the sessions, and a technical person will be able to look at the sessions and come up with certain conclusions.
And really it is to assist and to help the coaches along by having feedback. And, and asking questions and trying to get inside their brains to see why they did certain things and what is the reasoning behind it, and seeing how you can nurture them as coaches as they go along so that they can become superior coaches and eligible for selection at national level at the top level.
And that's a good point you're making, Doc. This technical committee should not be seen as the enemy to the local coach. Right. It should be seen as a resource that could help the development of many coach who would have aspiration to coach at the higher level. So that's a good point the doc is making. I'm not too sure if all the coaches, when that committee existed, probably saw them as that.
There is 2 people, I think, that's out of the coaching pool, national pool, that should be in. Call me old school or not, but I think we're letting them get away. And then when they get too old, we say, oh, we should have used them. That's Terry Fenwick and Everett Galley Company. We should use these people's ability or whatever they have now before it's too late?
I would just say on Mr. Fenwick's behalf, well, concerning him, I think at a point, he was at a senior level for quite a few years. But more recently, with him having the involvement of his academy, I think whatever thought process we had before on him, I think he has started to understand the youth level of football because his academy is thriving and doing pretty well and successful. And I think Mr. Cummings, because of being one of the legendary coaches and his involvement over the years, it's someone we need. And I would actually think more on the under 17 and under 20 because they're closer to the seniority than the younger ones, because I don't know if he's been involved with that group of younger kids over the last, let's say, 10 to 15 years. But I think closer to almost being professional, I think that is one of the persons that we need to have involved. I think Mr. Fenwick has shared his time in Trinidad and is one of the persons who understand the youth in Trinidad at football level.
Yeah, I think he's a local foreigner.
Yes,
and we never gave him a chance. And I think he deserves a chance, and we should at least give him a chance. Everybody else has got a chance.
I am against anybody who is a foreigner who is competing against a local of similar competence.
Oh, good point.
At this stage of our development, I want the local to get the job. It happens in medicine. It happens
in everything.
In everything else. If there are two people of equal competence competing for the job,
the tiebreaker should be local.
The local candidate.
Right,
and Alvin Cornell recently hinted on that. Why are we neglecting our local coach?
We would end right there because we run out of time. Viewers, thank you for tuning in. Guys, thank you so much for being here. ACTN, thank you for giving us the opportunity. We do have a Facebook page. Check us out. And we do have an email address, fieldofdreamsct@gmail.com. You can drop us a line. Shows ended. Go in peace. And Steve David.